Good evening, everybody. I am Ryan alongside Drew, as well as Joel, who is in the background working on some stuff. There he is. Good old Joel in the background. He's working on tomorrow's graphics for us. In the meantime, Michigan Storm Chasers here. We are going to do a live discussional briefing, relaxed version. We're not going to be too serious tonight, but it is worth talking about the upcoming winter season, what we think is going to happen, the overall pattern, and answer you guys' questions in terms of what we are going to be looking at for this upcoming winter season. So feel free to tune in. He'll be live for probably about a half hour to an hour tonight, depending on how interactive you guys are tonight in chat. But I want to start off the stream kind of untraditional here. I do want to bring up the overall situation in Jamaica that's going to be happening between now and tomorrow evening. Category 5 Hurricane Melissa is set to make landfall in Jamaica sometime tomorrow morning, perhaps closer to noon time frame. That is going to wreak havoc across Jamaica with flooding and a lot of heavy wind as well. It could be catastrophic in nature. It's not a good situation for our friends down there in Jamaica. Residents who are on the island there are trapped. There is no way to get out at this point. All the airports are closed. So whoever is left at the island is unfortunately stuck there. So prayers up for Jamaica. Again, landfall category 5 Hurricane Melissa will make landfall tomorrow morning, perhaps closer to the noon time frame. So I want to get that out of the way and just say our thoughts and our prayers and good vibes are being sent to Jamaica. Let's go ahead and dive back into the real reason we are live today, and that is Winter Outlook 2025 into 2026. Before we dive in, though, where are you guys watching from? Let us know. Also, go ahead and say something, Drew, for an audio check. Let's do an audio check real quick.
What's up, guys?
Let us know in chat here if you can hear Drew and I perfectly, and if we're good to go.
Yeah,
We'll go ahead and dive right in.
is the audio good, guys? Too loud, too quiet?
Good. We got Kentwood,
Gotcha.
Coldwater, Riverview. Awesome. Hazlitt. Sounding good. All right. Perfect, guys. Perfect. Let's go ahead and dive in.
Sweet.
All right. If you watched our video or you read through our discussion about 10 days ago, same follow up with this stream here. We're not going to go into too much of any new details here, but I want to first start off by explaining what we look for with winter outlooks. And Drew, I'm going to go ahead and remove us off the screen here while we talk, if you don't mind. I'm going to go ahead and do that just so it's full screen for these guys. We're going to talk about the ENSO phasing, El Nino, La Nina, and neutral, and how and what it means for us here in the Great Lakes region. So on your screen currently is a chart of oceanic temperatures across the globe. We are going to pay attention to the Pacific Ocean near the equator, this general region right here. That is the region we're going to tune into and monitor. As you can see, the current map here shows blue and green colors. On the graph below here, you're going to notice the average on this side here of the graph. This is warmer than average. On this side, the blues and greens, that's below average. As you can see here, the area circled is highlighting below average temperatures. That is equivalent to what we call a La Nina. La Nina, definition of it is basically waters that are cooler than average. Now, if the opposite were true, if it were an El Nino, we'd see warmer colors. Or, for example, we go back to 2023 winter. Look at all that warm water here by the equator. That is an El Nino. We'll go into that here a little bit more detail, but that's the opposite. All right. Now, what does it mean and why does it matter? Well, it matters because each effect or each phase of the ENSO cycle, El Nino, neutral, and La Nina, means different things for us here in the US. It influences our jet streams, temperature patterns, overall weather conditions across the US. So let's go ahead and start with what El Nino usually means here in the wintertime. If you guys think back to winter of 23 to 24, very warm, very little snowfall. It was a very strong El Nino pattern. On your screen currently is what the typical El Nino winter would look like. We see a lot of warm air in Canada as well as in northern states here in the US. That is because the polar jet stream is locked up here further north into Canada, and it basically bottles up all that cold air up here to the north. It does not allow it to penetrate further south, so we remain warmer than average. Also, the Pacific jet stream stays off to our south. It keeps things active across the south from California over to the East Coast, but also keeps the Ohio Valley and Great Lakes region on the drier side of things. This is a typical El Nino winter, which is the opposite of what we are expecting for this year. Now, let's go ahead and talk about La Nina. This is the pattern summarized that we're expecting this winter with some caveats we'll get to here in just a second. So, we're going to notice one thing in particular that's different is the warm air is now colder and the wetter conditions or the drier conditions have now turned to wetter across the Ohio Valley region. And that is largely in part due to two things. First off, the polar jet stream here, this wavy blue line, that is prone to dipping further south from Canada into the northern central US. And with that polar jet stream, hence the name polar, it brings a lot of polar Arctic air from the North Pole further south. Also, in part, the blocking high pressure here, that also aids in this jet stream positioning. Those two things work together to keep the polar jet stream further south. Now, also take note, we have wetter conditions over here on the west coast and also down here where we are at in the Ohio Valley and southern Great Lakes region. Do take note as well, the opposite is true for the south, drier and also warmer for our friends in Florida, Texas, California, and the southern tier of states in the US. So pretty much the exact opposite of what El Nino is. All right, now let's go ahead and dive into the forecast for this winter. The model predictions here, each line that you see on this graph is a model prediction. As you can see here on the right side of your screen, all these letters, those are each model. And as you can see, it's color coded to these lines on this graph here. So all the models are really starting to pick up on a weak La Nina. So how to read this graph, the 0 here, that's what we're going to call neutral, the neutral phase. Anything above 0, this is El Nino. Anything positive is El Nino. Anything below 0 is the La Nina, which is why you see a lot of these lines below that center neutral point. So we're looking at a weak La Nina. The further down you go into this, the stronger La Nina is. Or if the opposite were true, the further up you go, the stronger the El Nino is. So with this, we're seeing the lines dip right around the 0.5 to right around 1 range. So it's a weak La Nina. Some models try to show it getting close to a moderate La Nina, but for the majority, the average averages out to right around a weak La Nina. So it's not an overly strong pattern. It's just a kind of subtle, but it's there, so to speak. So that makes us think that, going back to this chart here, the impacts of a typical La Nina winter will be variable. We're going to see this as the overall pattern, but it's not going to be consistent, if that makes sense. So let's go ahead and talk about what we think is going to happen here. I'll go ahead and bring myself back on, as well as Drew and Joel back on the screen here, and kind of explain to you guys what we're kind of seeing with this pattern. So number one, if you guys remember last year, a lot of Arctic blasts occurred, and we think it's going to be similar this year. That polar jet stream will be variable. It sometimes might be up here in Canada, and other times it may dip south. And when it dips south, that is when we have those really brutal Arctic blasts. That is expectation number one. We're going to have quite a few Arctic blasts this winter, but with those Arctic blasts also come lake effect snow. Why that is, you get cold air from Canada. We have warm lake waters currently. They're going to remain warm into the early part of the winter. We expect lake effect season to start early and often here. So putting it all together for conclusion number one, lake effect snow season will be above average here in the state of Michigan. So what that means, for those of you who do not know or perhaps are new to Michigan, lake effect snow and the lake effect snow belts are here highlighted in blue primarily, but the light blue colors can also see lake effect snow. If the winds are strong enough, they sometimes can deviate further east or further south in some cases into those white zones. So overall, lake effect snow this year should be similar to last year, above average, and it should happen quite often with these Arctic blasts that move in and they'll bring us a lot of cool air. Now, outside of those Arctic blasts, I think the overall temperature pattern here, we're going to probably start a little warmer than average here to start November, December, perhaps early January as well. But the data we're seeing right now is really starting to point toward a very cold or a colder end to the season. So we may actually go through November and most of December On the warmer or perhaps near average temperature side of things, we're going to have similar patterns to last year. We could have some lake effect snow mixed in there, but when you look at the average temperature, it should be right around that or just a bit above that. So we start winter near to above average in terms of temperatures. But then the second half, January, February, March, perhaps even April, we're seeing a lot of long-term climate models, also historical patterns, line up to support a colder end to the season, January, February, and March, perhaps even April as well. That is also when we expect most of our system snow. So system snow, different than lake effect snow. System snow is happens with low pressure systems. And the lake effect snow is caused by those Arctic blasts when a lot of cold air moves over warm lake water. So a little bit of difference there. But most of our systems that produce a lot of snowfall will happen after the new year. That is our second conclusion here. So putting it all together here, the CPC, the Climate Prediction Center, based out of the NOAA branch of the government, they have put out a very similar seasonal outlook to what we think is going to happen. You're going to see the cooler than average temperatures for the northern half of the US, just like a typical La Nina, and the southern half of the US stays warm. As far as precip goes, the entire northern half of the US, minus the east coast, is in above average precipitation, and then the southern half of the US is in below average. So a very, very similar pattern here to what La Nina typically brings us here in the US during its pattern. So the CPC is also on board with this forecast. So what does it all mean? What are we all expecting? So the takeaways, again, lake effect snow season will start early this year, above average overall, and then Arctic blasts will be pretty common. As far as temperatures go, we start warmer, but then we trend down into a cooler end of the winter. After all is said and done, we should be right around near average in terms of temperatures for the season. Now, in terms of snowfall, above average, below average, near average, we're going with lake effect belts. Again, put it back on your screen here. Your lake effect belts are going to be pretty sure they're going to be above average with this pattern here. So any area in dark blue, and I'm going to say most areas in light blue, should be near to above average with their seasonal snowfall. Now, the tricky part with winter is outside of lake effect belts. How many systems are we going to have that produce a lot of snow? And that is going to be the key to this winter's snow forecast. Now, given everything we just talked about, I'm going to bring back up the La Nina pattern here. I want to take note the polar jet stream here also coincides with the active storm track. We're going to have a lot of low pressure systems that want to develop somewhere in this region or in this region over here when they come on land, and they're going to follow this jet stream here, and they're going to move up the East Coast. That puts us here in the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley region in a favorable position here for snow with these systems. Now, also take note that if this polar jet stream deviates just a little bit to the north here, we could also see split systems. Snow on the north side, freezing rain or ice in the middle, and then rain, perhaps severe weather on the south side. So it's going to largely depend on where this polar jet is going to deviate. That's going to really dictate what we're going to see this winter in terms of our precipitation. However, we feel here we're going to be colder for a majority of the season. That to us means that most of the precipitation will fall as snow. As such, our official thoughts here at MSC for the entire state of Michigan, including lake effect belts and also even southeast Michigan, I know you guys have missed out on some snow last year, entire state, near to above average with their snowfall. That is our official forecast here based on everything we're looking at as a whole combined into one thought. So, once again, concluding, lake effect snow above average for our lake effect belts, a warmer start to the season followed by a colder end of the season, and then above to near average snowfall for the entire state. With that being said, that is our forecast here. Drew, did I miss anything you would like to bring up or discuss?
No, I think you perfectly summarized everything right to the dot. Once again, the main 2 points are going to be lake effect snow and then questions in regards to storm tracks with our low pressure systems, as Ryan was mentioning. Typically in Michigan, when we see our bigger when it comes to snow systems or blizzards, we usually look to the west and the Rockies, mainly around Colorado. We call these Colorado lows usually, and that's what we're going to be kind of looking for in terms of our bigger, more widespread systems. But there's definitely a lot more confidence in terms of our lake effect machine, basically will be pretty active because we will get shots of cold air, and our lake effect belts will see snowfall for sure during this winter season.
Yeah, I think Drew hit the nail on the head there. If our confidence is high about anything we just talked about, it's that lake effect snow will be pretty active this year. And that is largely in part due to that Arctic blast, Arctic air that's going to move in with this pattern overall. So I think the main question here is how often we're going to see deviations of that polar jet stream, because sometimes it can stay locked to our south here and just remain in Arctic air for several weeks. And that's a true winter. Other times, kind of like we're expecting this year, it's probably going to deviate north and south. And that will also indicate lake effect snow, but also similar to last year, snow squalls. We could have some windy snow squalls this year. We could have those split systems where we have some ice to talk about, or perhaps some rain for southeast, or I keep saying southeast, but for southern Michigan. The further south you go, the warmer you're going to be with this system, or with this pattern. So it's a um, it's a very interesting uh, winter, but I think it's going to be very similar to last year in terms of everything put together, but with just a bit more snowfall. I think. We have one of our chasers, Tyler, here in chat saying, "Give me a solid snow squall, I'll be happy." I think a lot of Michiganders over the past couple of years have just kind of, if you don't live in the lake effect belt, they've kind of just written off heavy snow because it's been a while since we had a significant snowstorm, especially in southeast Michigan, but also South Michigan, parts of central Michigan as well. So a lot of the expectation is we're going to have systems and they're not going to do much. So I think this winter will be a little bit different. But my personal opinion, I think we'll get some good snow this year. Thank you, Dee Dee, for coming back for month number 10. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate you. And you bet. Yeah, we do not need any more ice storms here in the state, if we're being honest. But the unfortunate reality of winter is we typically see about an ice storm every single year somewhere in the state. That's typical, especially in February when winter's ending. We start getting a lot of warm air starting to build in. That's typical time frame for it. So this winter should be pretty much the same. Perhaps just a bit more heightened risk of some ice storms just because of the pattern. But we're talking hypothetical here. It's going to come down to the exact, with the polar jet stream and so on and so forth. Not Summer says, I still have my heat off. Anyone else have their heat off still? You are crazy. Just going to point that out there. You are crazy. The heat's been on at my house for probably 2, 3 weeks.
Yeah, same here.
Heat is on, but being that my bedroom is living room, door wide open. Hey, that makes sense. Julie says, heck no, it's too cold. Bob says, I hope so. I want to plow some snow this year. And so do a lot of people who run snow plowing businesses. I keep picking on Southeast Michigan, but it's almost comical how snow avoided the area last year. In fact, here's the overall snowfall for last winter. As you can see here, the typical lake effect belts got pummeled by our usual lake effect snow bands here. But then outside of those, we didn't have much snow over here. We had 16.7 inches in Adrian. We had 12.5 in Monroe. That's 20, 30 inches below the normal. So we had quite a snow hole across southeast Michigan. Red Dozer says, yuck, that's all with a super chat. Says, thank you, Red Dozer, for that super chat. Appreciate your support. It's been a while since we had a good winter here. I say that because I'm on the east side of Michigan. If you lived in the lake effect belts like Drew does over in the GR area, he is going to tell you that he had a lot of lake effect snow last year. But I guess it depends on where you're at.
I know for me, when I live in the west side of the state, I live west of GR, so it's pretty hard for me not to experience a quiet winter just because we have our own snow belts here in West Michigan, and last winter was definitely the case. And we had for anyone that remembers last winter, we definitely had about a week or two of a nice big Arctic blast that kind of came through January. and we just had nonstop lake effect snow. I remember widespread school closures that were present as well on the west side, just due to how cold it was, and with all the lake effect snow on top of that. So it's pretty hard for me personally to avoid no snow, just because I'm literally 30 minutes away from Lake Michigan. So
Got a question in chat here. Does El Nino and La Nina alternate a lot, or will one stay for a lot of years before changing? That is a great question. And the answer is a typical La Nina or El Nino cycle. We call them phases or cycles. It typically alternates about every 3 years. So you're going to have one be dominant for a couple years and it's going to change. It's not exact, but a typical pattern will shift between 1 to 3 years or so. Bob said had one good plow on the southeast Michigan last winter. Yep. And there is that one snowstorm we don't want to talk about. I know Joel's listening behind the scenes here. We just talked about this earlier today. We had 1 or 2 snowstorms that models showed a nice heavy swath of like 8 to 12 inches across central and eastern Michigan. We forecasted it based on the data we had, and then within 12 hours, the snow had shifted completely into Canada to our east. And on top of that, we had tons and tons of dry air fill in. And we ended up getting like 2 inches out of a 12-inch forecast. It sucked being a forecaster in Michigan for that system. But model data, that's something we can talk about too, Drew. Model data is important to winter forecasting because just 1 degree can make all the difference. And I can vouch over the past couple of months, the model data has become, I'm not going to say completely inaccurate, but it's gotten a lot harder to forecast simple stuff that used to be pretty easy to forecast. So we may have some challenges upcoming winter here at getting some. I'm not going to say being accurate, but it's going to make it a challenge overall with the lack of data we have. So we'll try and navigate that as we go. I don't know what to expect, but that could be an issue this winter as well for a lot of forecasters.
yeah, that's definitely something that's always tricky about winter forecasting. As Ryan mentioned, is first of all, if we talk about synoptic snow and your typical low pressure systems, a few miles can make a difference, especially if we, as Ryan was mentioning, if we have more of that snow, rain, and more of a mixed precipitation. All it takes is just a little bit of a shift, and you could be getting some really wet, heavy snow to basically rainfall. So it comes down to the wire. That's why we can't say well ahead of time, yes, you're going to get snow, or yes, you're going to get rain right when you're in that battleground, because it's just really difficult to pinpoint it, and it will literally come, to the last few hours even
Yep.
to kind of nail down. Because like Ryan mentioned, it comes down to that final degree or two, and then it's not just the synoptic snow that we have to think about, but it's also the lake effect snow. Global models like the Euro, the GFS, they don't really do a great job in terms of picking out how our lakes will react to cold air kind of going over top of them. It's usually models like the HER, for an example, more of your short range models that can kind of pinpoint where these heavier lake effect snow bands can be. So we might have a system where, let's just say we're about 5 days out and it's looking mediocre. Let's say it's like a clipper system that's coming from Canada. But then if we get closer to that 1 to 3 day outlook, and if we see a lot more colder air associated with it, then that could increase our confidence for maybe even more snowfall along our snow belt areas along the lake. So there's a lot that kind of goes into it, and it depends on what we're forecasting. And I would say, Ryan, for sure, probably the most difficult thing to forecast in winter is freezing rain, when it comes to figuring out if locations will get freezing rain and how much freezing rain could even accumulate.
Yeah, on top of that too, Drew, freezing rain is very hard to really pinpoint, but even snowfall itself, especially when you're given ranges, like we're trying to like do you as a viewer, do you think anything of the weather forecast when we call for a half inch of rain, but you get an inch instead, or you get maybe 3/4 of an inch? In snow terms, that could be 6 inches of snow. And that's how exact forecasting needs to be in the wintertime. Depending on the liquid ratio of snow, that's very advanced stuff we're not going to get into tonight. But trying to pinpoint down to the nearest inch exactly in your backyard, it's very difficult, which is also why you see larger ranges like 1 to 4, or perhaps 3 to 5, or 3 to 6 even. So that's why you see those larger ranges, because it can vary mile to mile. But The entire winter forecasting, Drew, is just a nightmare. It's actually quite stressful. It really is.
Indeed.
We got Kaylee in chat said, sorry if you already answered this. Do you think this will also be a longer winter? Kaylee, based on data that we see here now, I want to highlight this, what I'm about to say. If we zoom forward to March and April, that's like 5, 6 months out. Okay, so things are going to change between now and then. But based on data we see now, I do think the second half of winter will be the worst of it. I don't know if it'll be a prolonged winter, but right now I would say the second half of the winter, I'm going to say for sure January, February, and probably the first half of March is going to be that time frame of snow. After that, I think it's fair game. We'll have to kind of see what we are looking at when we get to like January, for example, when we get a little bit closer. Because it's kind of impossible to say if winter's going to last into April and perhaps even May. We've had snow in May before, so it's not impossible.
Yeah, once we get closer more to that March, April/May timeframe, we can start talking more about our spring season. But like kind of Ryan mentioned, it's a little too early for that. I know a lot of you guys are wondering because I know our past few recent spring seasons have been pretty warm and stormy. But right now it looks to be more on the cooler side in terms of that, especially early spring. But we'll know a lot more when we get closer to that time frame.
We got Tommy back for month number 14, says my go-to for weather and forecast. Thank you, Tommy, for your support. Appreciate it. Yes, Summer, thank you for that. Anybody with complaints about the winter weather can be directed to our meteorologist, who is below Joe or below Drew right there, Joel. He'll take any and all of your complaints via email at joel@michiganstormchasers.com. No, we do our best to forecast it for you guys. We're not going to be perfect. We're never going to be perfect. We like to think we can be perfect, but with weather, you never really can. We try though. We try. We got Evan, one of our partner chasers in chat, says 16 months already as an EF3 member. Thank you, Evan, for month number 16. Appreciate you. Haley says would very much rather have snow than tornadoes. I think a lot of people can agree with you, Haley. Mike in chat here, any guess on how much snow Grand Rapids is going to get? That's a very, very precise question for a very, very precise location. So I don't think it's appropriate to really say exactly like a range. I will say near to above average would be your snowfall. I really think that's a really good generalized answer for you. And that goes for anybody here in the state of Michigan. Because getting exact snowfall totals, especially when we're perhaps 2 months away from our first snowflakes from a synoptic system, that's a little reckless in my opinion. So summarizing it, near to above average would be a good guess. Lisa asks, why do they give winter weather advisories for 1 to 3 inches of snow? I'm not trying to be difficult, but isn't that just typical snow for winter? Why they do an advisory for it? That's a great question, Lisa. And I'm actually glad you asked that because I think it's important. So I'm going to take you guys back to last year. We had a couple big systems of snow that dumped 4 to 6 inches or so across parts of the state. And in those events, and also with lake effect events, we had accidents, but a lot of people drove safer because there's a lot of snow expected. When you get down to an inch or perhaps 2 or 3 inches of snow, a lot of people have the mindset of, that's not a lot, so I'm going to drive 55. So personally, I think the advisories should be in place because a lot of the accidents, we can see it firsthand, a lot of the accidents we have here on our highways in the state happen when there's very little snowfall. I'm talking the 1-inch dustings or the 2-inch, cover the ground type of snows. That is when people expect the least or should I say, expect they don't expect conditions to be very bad, but yet they're the worst. So the advisory is there to say, hey, heads up, we had some snow, things are going to be slick out there. Be careful. And I think a lot of people misunderstand that it's for our protection more so than it is for anything headline or click or newsworthy. If that makes sense. So advisory is there for anything below, I don't know the criteria, but I think it's below 5 or 6 inches or something under a 12-hour period. And anything over that should be like a winter storm watch or warning, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. I will add this as well. I've chased for several years across West Michigan during the winter season. I've seen it all, blizzards to ice storms. And as Ryan mentioned, those small increments of 1 to 3, 2 to 4, you know, when you first think of it, you think, oh, that's not bad, right? Well, that's obviously it's the complete opposite. And the reason why is, if I put this as an example, let's just say you're driving on the highway, right? So you're always gonna have snow plows out when there's bad or hazardous weather where there's snow, right? To treat the roads. So they might be on the highway because they're going to treat the highways first in cities and treat all those roads. And let's just say you can go 60, 70 miles an hour, no problem, right? But they can't be everywhere at once. So let's just say if you get off the highway and get to more of a side street, those roads could be icy or the bridges could be icy. And if you're going that speed and if you hit that one little spot or little patch, all it takes is just hitting that one spot going too fast.
Yep.
And then boom, you go right off the road.
Yep.
So, whereas if it's more snow, let's say it's 8 to 12 inches of snow, well, then it's a lot more difficult for the plows to keep up, right? They're going to be
Mm-hmm.
more busy on the highways. It's more widespread, and then you just see snow everywhere, right? And then that makes you kind of go back to, oh, shoot, I should drive slower. So that's why we kind of see a lot of accidents on more of these lower end days. And Ryan was kind of mentioning this too with winter weather advisories. So when they issue ones for like 1 to 3, 2 to 4, they issue it under a time thing, right? On under 12 hours. So it's one thing if you get 1 to 3 inches of snowfall in 2 days, right? That's a very big span of time frame where that could fall, and it's a lot easier for plows and road maintenance to keep up with that. But if that 1 to 3 inches of snowfall falls in, let's just say, 2 to 3 hours, you're talking some pretty heavy snowfall rates, right? Especially, and this is pretty common too. We saw this a little bit last winter with our flash freeze, our cold fronts, our snow squall events, right? Where you have roads are completely fine, and then you hit that squall, and just you have near whiteout conditions and really intense snowfall rates, right? And that's where you can get your accidents to happen. So we saw it a lot last year, unfortunately, and I really hope this year that's not the case throughout the state.
Well said. Crazy Bob in chat here says, I live on the fringe of lake effect snow. I know how the finger of snow can develop quickly and drop an inch while 3 to 5 miles north or south has sunshine. That is a very important point, Crazy Bob. And a lot of people complain, hey, you forecasted 3 to 6 inches. I got one or I got eight. And that's nature lake effect. A very slight deviation in the wind changes the trajectory of the entire snow squall. And that is something that forecasters we try our best to pinpoint, but it fluctuates based on wind. So it can and it will fluctuate.
I will say too, with our more West Michigan based viewers, wind direction's huge, as Ryan mentioned, in terms of how our winds are facing, right? I know from based on living here in West Michigan, if you get more of a west to east wind direction, typically speaking, places like Grand Rapids, central western Michigan, I would say, is more of your hotspot. And I'm talking more just kind of focused in central lower Michigan. But then if you have more of a northwest to southeast wind, then you have areas like Kalamazoo, Van Buren County, especially Interstate 94. That's where you get your hot spots. And then when you go from more of a north to directly south band, then you have more Barron County and Northwest Indiana getting affected. And I know personally, based on my snow chasing events, each one has its own hazards. Typically speaking, if you get that northwest to southeast direction, Interstate 94 can just be terrible. We're talking, accidents, pileups. And then if you get more of your west to east direction, then you have kind of more downtown GR around that area, US 131, 96 as well, that can get impacted. And then if you get more of that north to south band, then that is right along 196. And sometimes you can get maybe your more intense lake effect bands if we're talking more lower Michigan, based on those north to south bands, because you just have one singular band that just tracks right along the lake. And then they can get just several feet that can just accumulate there. So it kind of just depends where you live. Obviously, if you live, around northwest lower Michigan or the UP, I'm sure you guys are well aware. If you feel the wind direction, you'll have different directions with the wind, with the lake effect snow bands, but each direction kind of has its own hazards that it brings. So, and you guys will see that throughout this winter season for sure.
We have Andy with a good question that correlates to what you just said, Drew. Airfield maintenance at LAN with warmer Lake Michigan temperatures. How do winds look to carry lake effect this far? Andy, Lansing is in a good enough spot where a lot of lake effect snow doesn't really reach you over there. Although it's not impossible, we have seen it before. The heaviest of bands are well off to your west there. Look on the snowfall map on your screen there from last year. Lansing is right about here. You can see the heavier lake effect snow is going to be right about this area. So you're a good ways removed from it, but you do occasionally see some quick dustings or a quick couple inches that does accumulate in some circumstances. But generally speaking, you're good over there.
Usually we see more inland locations getting, when they get lake effect snow, it's usually because of a stronger cold front that's moving through, or a very strong low pressure where it has backed winds in the backside, and that's when you can get inland locations to get more lake effect snow. So yeah.
Kathy in chat here says, I want to thank you for all you guys do. Do you think snow will happen in December? Kathy, it depends on where you're at in Michigan. If you're in a lake effect belt, I'm going to say yes. If you're outside of lake effect belt, it's going to depend on how cold we are. And yeah, that's pretty much it because any precipitation we're going to get is going to be pretty much snow if we're cold enough for it. So if you're in a lake effect belt, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to see snow in December. Outside of that, it's going to come down to our temperature patterns in terms of the synoptic snowfall. And I want to reiterate something here that a lot of our competitors, I'm not going to say who, but a lot of our competitors are throwing out words like historical or major or just random words that really describe this winter as it's going to be a doozy, so to speak. I don't think that's appropriate overall. We're not calling for a huge winter here. I do think we're going to have above average snowfall, but in terms of what a lot of these creators are making out to be, I don't think we're going to be historical or major. Or I mean, a few systems could be major. They could, but overall season major, I wouldn't throw those terms around. If that makes sense, I just keep it pretty subtle and just say near to above average snowfall with a lot of lake effect snow. That's how we're going to go with our wording. Again, we're not trying to hype this up. Our competitors, I think, are trying to hype it up a little bit. I don't personally see the historical nature of this season.
It kind of goes back to what you were saying, Ryan. This is a weaker La Nina. This isn't a strong La Nina. So we have more uncertainties with our polar jet. So this isn't like a slam dunk forecast. You are going to get slammed. There are still some other leeways that could impact our winter in terms of how much snow could accumulate and where it could accumulate as well.
Yep.
But we'll say this too. We say this for severe weather. All it takes is one event. For multiple tornadoes to happen across the state. You can say the same thing too with the winter season. All it takes is one event, whether it's El Nino or La Nina, to cause widespread snowfall. It's just our chances of seeing it is the main difference here. So with us having a weaker La Nina, our chances for more systems to come in slightly increase. It doesn't mean it's guaranteed and it's going to happen all the time every single month, but our chances for it increase because of that. And then if it's an El Nino, our chances for big wintry systems to come here are lesser. Doesn't mean we can't get any. It's just our chances and our overall confidence on having multiple ones are much lower and is more unlikely to happen.
Yeah, long-term forecasting is not really about the nitty-gritty details about how warm or how cold exactly it's going to be. Like we couldn't tell you the Christmas is going to be 32 degrees and snowy. We can't tell you that. But we can look at overall patterns and tell you, okay, well, this is lining up to be cooler during this general time frame, and that's how we do long-term forecasting. We can't get specific with it, but we can talk about the generalized patterns and what to expect and what historically it usually means for us. That's how long-term forecasting can really start keying in on being accurate. Ninja Turtle says or asks, how about terms of ice? Expecting more ice storms. I I don't know if I would say expecting more ice storms. Again, going back to what I just said, the overall pattern, it may support split systems with snow on the north side where it's cooler. There's a section of ice in the middle of that system, and below it there's rain and perhaps severe weather. Those split systems may be pretty common this year, similar to how it was last year, which may support ice for certain areas. But whether that's Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, or Kentucky, excuse me, that's going to be up in the air. We don't know that just yet. Are we ready for Christmas music the day after Halloween? Yeah, guys, Christmas music is about 5 days away, whether you like it or not. We got one of our camera sponsors, Crystal Lake House, in chat. Says that's where we follow you guys. No hype, just facts. We try to keep it pretty simple. The only time we're ever going to use hype verbiage is if it's necessary. For example, if there is a large damaging tornado on the ground heading toward a large populated area, we're going to use a very serious wording and tone. That deserves it. But no, we're not going to call it what we think is going to be a above average snowfall season. We're not going to call it historical. It's just I think that's wrong.
I know for me personally with Christmas music, I like it. I like winter a little bit. Give me a month of it, month and a half, but then after that, done. Like after Christmas, after the new year, I'm done with snow. And it's like, give me
Yep.
warm weather. I have some leniency when it comes to winter weather. And after a month and a half of snow, I'm done. As long as I get my thunder snow. If I can get thunder snow, then I'll be happy. For those that remember last one of the systems we covered last winter, we had widespread thunder snow across western and central portions of lower Michigan. That was a interesting. Yeah, that was quite something to experience something like that. It was definitely something that was on my bucket list, and was happy to experience for sure.
Adam says, I hope we have a mostly wild winter here. Wild or mild? I think wild and M and W are on the opposite sides. I'm assuming you meant wild with that. Wild winter, I mean, it could snow a lot. It could. I don't know if I'd call it a wild winter, though. We'll see. Lisa says, so no big risk of blizzard of 78 this year. In parentheses, I know there's always a risk looking unlikely. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's looking unlikely or likely. I'm gonna be neutral on that. There's always potential there for a big system, including a blizzard. There's always potential in the winter. So we can't rule it out or say for sure. Red Dozer back for month number 17 says, thank you. I hope we aren't as bad as the winter as 2020, 2013 to 14. Personally, I do not recall that. That was when I first started getting into weather. So I don't personally know what happened that year. I'm curious now if we go back to 13 and 14 on the SSTs.
I have some memories of that winter. I was very young during that time frame, but I do remember when I was living in West Michigan, we had I think, several pretty intense winter storms slash maybe I think even a blizzard that was mixed in there too. That brought a lot of snowfall. I will say, Ryan, I have seen some outside sources that were comparing this to similar winters.
Yeah.
Once again, I don't. It's not a good thing, in my opinion, to be like, this winter will look like this winter, or could, because then that's just going to make people think, oh, well, we had a blizzard and we had 5 ice storms, and that means we're going to get that much. No, 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 no. That's not how. It's not how winter forecasting or really forecasting goes in general. Could we see similar patterns? When it comes to what Ryan has, like ENSO and MPO and all that, yes, you can use that. But when it comes to how will I see a blizzard or will I see an ice storm? No, you can't. That's not how it works.
Yeah. And a lot of long-term forecasting comes down to what we call teleconnections, and basically another fancy term for a lot of our sea surface temperatures in certain parts of the globe. So the main influencer we believe this year is ENSO, which is the water temperatures near the equator, which is right here. That impacts our jet streams. It can impact several different things. But also, I didn't really mention this in our write up or the video or this live stream. We have a pretty, we're going to call it a warm blob or a warm nose in the northern Pacific. We call it the NPO. That warm water can amplify our jet stream just a tad bit. It can also fuel and pump moisture into the jet stream as well, which could add moisture for our systems to produce snowfall if we're cold enough. So we're going to have to watch this NPO as well, because if this goes cold or cools off, that could also change how this winter behaves. But also, Drew, I want to say one thing with this, in my experience at least, and what I've done with my research. When we have a very warm northern Pacific oscillation, which is this area right up here in the northern Pacific, when this is warm, this does sometimes have a tendency to keep the polar jet stream also further north. So that also could play a factor in that deviation of our polar jet stream a little bit, because a warm NPO historically does not like to interact with a polar jet stream. So we'll have to kind of keep an eye on that and how that plays into this winter as well.
One thing I'll add quick here too is that we haven't really talked a lot about in our stream. But obviously, during the winter season, we talk about snow, ice, but then there's obviously the hazard of cold, how cold it can get. And as Ryan was mentioning, if the MPL is more of an influence to our winter, then we won't see um, more shots of colder air. Now we'll see where this polar vortex lines up, but obviously if you have temperatures near 30s compared to below zero, that's going to be huge when it comes to not just the temperature itself or feels like, but also in terms of snow, right? Because um, I'll just use this as an example. Back into our last winter, when we had a Arctic blast that went through during the middle of the month, we had temperatures in the single digits. I think wind chills around zero, if not slightly below zero. And what happened was we were getting lake effect snow consistently because we had, once again, warmer water temperatures with really cold air going on top. And the problem was since it was so cold out, a lot of the plow trucks couldn't even get rid of the snow because the salt wouldn't work. So temperatures play a huge factor when it comes to snowfall. It's the same. It's the same thing when it comes to temperatures being in the 30s. You have more moisture in the air. That's when you see bigger snowflakes, more of that slushy type snow too. So there's a lot of things, that we've been kind of continuously highlighting in this stream that come into play when it comes to forecasting for winter weather. It's not just, oh, is it going to be snow or is it going to be rain? That's when you have to apply that ratio of our temperatures and the timing of the system. There's just a lot that goes into it.
Yep, there really is in winter forecasting. Speaking of winter, though, Summer has a question. Can you provide the correct definition of a blizzard? And a lot of you guys may get caught up on this. In chat, tell me what you guys think. Is a blizzard about the wind speed and visibility, or is it about the winds and the amount of new snow that falls? Let me know. Let me know in chat. While you guys are putting that in chat, I know there's a little bit of a delay between my speaking and you guys actually hearing it come over the air. So while you guys are putting their guesses in chat here, I do see a couple comments. I had a couple comments. I lost them. Oh yeah, Captain asked, "Does anybody know if we talked about the possibility of ice storms this stream at all?" We have, and it's a pattern that's going to come down to the positioning of the polar jet stream. It's possible we get some ice storms this year, but I don't think it's. I would say if there's any risk level, it's perhaps just a tad bit heightened with this pattern, but I don't think it's a large freak out like we're going to have numerous ice storms this year. We can't say that. I would say the pattern would support it if the polar jet stream is in the right positioning at the right time. So Crystal Lake House says wind and snow. Summer says visibility and wind speed. It depends on wind and freshly snow fallen. Wind's visibility, wind and snow, wind and visibility. Okay, so it's kind of mixed here, guys. So the correct definition of a blizzard is not how much new snow falls. It has nothing to do with it, actually. Blizzard criteria, I'm going to read this off of the Weather Service. A blizzard is defined as a storm which contains large amounts of blowing snow that is sustained winds over 35 miles per hour. Sorry, frequent gusts or sustained winds over 35 miles per hour or greater with falling or blowing snow that reduces visibility to a quarter mile or less. It has nothing to do with the amount of new snow that falls. So again, definition, frequent gust or sustained winds of 35 miles per hour or greater combined with blowing snow or falling snow that is reducing visibility to less than a quarter mile for at least 3 hours.
Good example of that too is, we always, it can be confusing. I get it, because usually when we do get a quote unquote blizzard, whether it's a low pressure system that's moving through with all snow or the lake effect, we usually do get a lot of snow. But places like North Dakota, South Dakota, the plains, they get blizzards, but they don't really get too much snow, because usually when they get blizzards, they don't really have a lot of moisture from the Gulf, but they have really strong cold air and really strong winds that are associated with it. So you can get things called like ground blizzards, where they can have blizzard conditions and only just have a few inches of snow that are falling. So it's by the time the systems usually come here, usually we have more moisture, whether it's coming from our Gulf or if it's coming from our lakes. So
Drew been live here for about an hour, so I'm going to look to wrap this up here and get on with our evening. Appreciate you guys watching. If you guys have any final questions to pop in chat here, now is the time to do it. We'll give you guys about a minute or two to do that. But in the meantime, I'd like to shout out a couple sponsors we have here on the channel. I'm going to remove all of us. Actually, I'm not going to do that because the sponsor is going to cover us anyway. I want to first start by saying a thank you to StormGuard Roofing and Construction based out of Detroit metro area. We have Lifestyle Exteriors based out of the Lansing area. We got Cass Roofing and Siding based out of Potterville. We got Mike Hayes Roofing and Siding out of the Thumb of Michigan. We got Kuiper Tree Care out of West Michigan. McKay Tree Specialist out of Southeast Michigan. On Top Roofing based out of Livingston County. FBI Buildings across all of Lower Michigan. We have Top Gun Roofing Exteriors across West Michigan. We have Shield Public Adjusters covering any insurance needs across the state. Also, Schneider Commercial Building Solutions for any commercial building solution needs across the state. A-Class Construction and Restoration out of Mason County. Rainbow Restoration out of Kent County and surrounding areas. Our communication sponsor, Rapid Radios. Our Skycam sponsor, Guardian Technologies. We've got American Arbor Tree Services in Southwest Michigan. Apex Restoration out of Grand Blanc. And lastly, feel free to donate to our partner, the Ronald McDonald House of Detroit, by dialing the number on your screen. Thank you to all of these sponsors who help keep operations rolling here at MSC. We could not do it without them and their help and their support of us, but also support you guys in the event you happen to need services from them. So feel free to get in contact if you happen to need their services. Feel free to contact us as well. We can put you in touch with the correct people if you don't know your correct sponsor for your area. Any final questions before we hop out and roll the outro? Not yet, Captain. We will coming soon, though. It'll be in our new redesigned, uh, we'll call it a graphic package. We're redesigning a lot of stuff behind the scenes, including those. So you'll see it all in the new year, but we are hard at work redesigning stuff, and you'll see it eventually. We got a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. I don't see any other questions here. I see a question here from Mango. I've been hearing it'll be just like 2013 winter. Does that still apply to the Southeast, or is that just the UP? Mango, I don't think it's really fair to compare it to previous years. Our forecast, based on the data we see, is near to above average for the entire state of Michigan with snowfall. We're going to start the season warmer in we're talking like November, December, and then we're going to be cooler on the second half of the season, January, February, March. I don't think it's really appropriate to compare any years to previous years to a T. Could it be like 2013? Could, yeah, it could. But there's a lot of deviating factors that we see that may throw this forecast into left field. Does that make sense? So our confidence to say, yeah, this year is going to be exactly like 2013, it's on the low end of things. So, Drew or Joel, any final thoughts, conclusions, anything you want to bring up before we hop out of here?
No, I think, we highlighted everything, I think, perfectly well for you guys. Obviously, winter season is creeping up. It is nearly here, and, always have you guys covered. And I know we'll have several, including myself, occasionally we'll be out and about chasing, especially if it's more of a bigger end threat when it comes to lake effect or a snow squall or anything like that. So, yeah.
As well as we do winter coverage here at MSC. So if you're new here, we will be forecasting, we will be chasing, and we also will be live occasionally on our page for coverage. We also post a lot of traffic updates. So feel free to follow along for those as well. We post usually major accidents and stuff that shut down major highways. We'll be posting those. We also have some traffic cameras coming, courtesy of our sponsors for our cameras, as well as Garch Technologies. We have a couple I'm excited for. So I'm not going to say where just yet, but we able to watch some traffic also in real time this winter and update you guys with the cameras as well. So with that said, I am Ryan. Below is Drew. We also have Joel, who has been on and off here working on some graphics behind the scenes. He's not feeling the greatest. Also have tomorrow off. So Joel, if you're still here, say bye. There he is. He's there. He's there. He's always there. But he is still in the background working on stuff. Just wanted to say, pop him back on there and say bye. So we're good. Anything, Joel, you want to say?
Nope, we're good.
Okay, cool.
Covered pretty well.
All right. We'll talk to you guys later. And hopefully we'll, honestly, the next time it might be live might be a winter storm briefing. That's hard to think about. It could be because we don't see anything severe coming up. So that's interesting. Hopefully we see you guys before then, but if not, we may catch you on a snowstorm briefing in the near future. So you guys enjoy your evening. I'm Ryan again. Below me is Drew, and third down there is Joel. Signing off for the night. You guys stay safe. Enjoy your week.
Hey, everyone.
See you guys.